Hey, welcome to Provins Garage. On this episode, we're making some moves. Setting my goals high because I want to rip Merikart, and I think it wants me to rip it too. So, hang tight, here we go. All right, it is officially summer here in Florida, and that means that it's now scorching. So we're gonna hear some fan noise in the background, and I apologize for that. Anyway, today we're gonna hook up some steering. So I got this seat sitting in here. I added a couple more supports to the frame. Those are just tacked in. And I'm just kind of trying to get it set up to see where the seat's gonna go compared to the steering wheel and the pedals. First order of business, we need to get this steering set up, and the way we need to set it up is so that where it pivots on each side is in line with where my heim joints line up on here. Otherwise, we're going to get bump steer, and we really don't want that. So I need to extend these little guys out about 1.5 inches on each side, and then we'll build some adjustable arms. I got a couple sets of heim joints, reverse thread and normal thread, so that we can just twist and adjust it and then lock it down with a little jam nut. So I'm gonna get on extending those things, and then we'll see where we go. All right, so there's a couple ways I could have done this. So basically these connect to my heim joints for my steering tie rod that I'm gonna make. And so these just thread in here. And so one option was going to be to make something that would extend this out. So like something like this, drill all the way through, tap that to the same thread size as that, and weld this to the end. But tapping straight through a hole that's 2 inches long is kind of a pain in the ass. So I decided to go with option B, which is to cut the threads off of this end piece, and then extending that out with another piece where I'll weld the end of this into the end of here. That'll give me the extension I need, and it's much easier than having to tap that whole thing. So that's what we're gonna do. We are really close to having some steering hooked up on this thing. I got my tie rods made, and I just have it tacked together for now, just in case I have to change something. But just like the A-arms on the front and the back, I had to make some inserts on the lathe. I threaded them and tapped them for these heim joints, which are 1/2 20 thread. And one side is left-hand thread, which is reverse thread. The other side is just right-hand thread, normal thread. And that way, when I go to lengthen or shorten my tie rod ends, I can just spin the middle and it'll lengthen or shorten whichever way I twist it. So you can see that I also got my steering rack extensions welded together and installed now. And I had to make, again, just like I did for the front suspension, some extensions for my heim joints, because where this attached to the spindle, it has to have the same amount of travel as the suspension does, or the heim joints for the suspension does. So I had to make some more of those. So I spent a little bit of time on the lathe again. And I also didn't have the right size bolts, so I didn't have the right size bolts again, so I had some threaded rod and I had to weld some nuts on there. But got 4 bolts, all of them are the right length, so we're ready to go get this set up and get ready to install it. So once we get it in there, I can kind of get an idea of where it needs to sit, what kind of angle my steering rack needs to sit at, so that my steering column can come down and attach to that without interfering with the pedals or anything else. So let's go get this thing on there. All right, so I got this thing mocked up in here, and the first time I tried to put it in, I realized I didn't follow the golden rule of measure twice and cut once. I had my measurement down for what I needed it to be and thought I had it right. And it turns out I didn't. So I measured the lengths of my tie rods to be the same length from the heim joint to the other heim joint as it would be from the heim joint of my A-arm to the other heim joint. And that way I can mostly eliminate bump steer when this thing goes over bumps. And if you don't know what bump steer is, it's when you hit a bump, if your connecting rods are not the same length or they're not the right length, your wheels can turn in or turn out, and it's going to kind of mess you up when you're trying to steer around a corner or something. So anyway, I measured what I thought was right, cut it, tacked everything together, and it just wasn't fitting right. Probably because I'm an idiot. But anyway, I got it in now, and it is right, and it fits great. So now I just need to make a little bracket to hold my little steering rack here, and then we can kind of get this thing able to steer. So let's do it. that, it appears as though we have some steering. So that's pretty neat. So it definitely still needs a bunch of adjustment. You know, I gotta set my alignment, figure out if I want it slightly towed in or slightly towed out, adjust my camber a little bit. And we do still have some bump steer. So you can see when I push down, the wheels turn in just a little bit. So they tow in just a little bit. And honestly, that's probably something we can live with. I can try to adjust that out a little bit by changing the length of my tie rods, and might be able to get rid of it, but it's not a whole lot, and I think it'll be okay. And that's something that we can tune down the road. Well, okay, we got some steering. So I didn't show a lot of the fabrication of this because I kind of went through several iterations of how it came together. I had an idea of what I wanted, obviously, a steering wheel in a good position, but the main factor that made me change it a few times was that I need room for my pedals. And I initially had it set up so I had a joint here, U-joint here, and a U-joint at the bottom, but that had my shaft coming straight down from the steering wheel to the steering rack. And that pretty much eliminated my room for a brake pedal. By adding an extra U-joint here, I was able to bring it over and then down, and then another U-joint to go down to the steering rack. But when you do that, you have to have something to stabilize your steering shaft down here, because otherwise this thing would just wobble around and it definitely would not work very well. So luckily in this big bin of parts that I got, I had a 5/8 Heim joint that I was able to put on the steering shaft and then mount to the frame, so that stabilizes everything. And by having this extra kink in here, I have way more room for my pedals. So I think it turned out pretty great. I may change it again in the future after I build the whole roll cage. You know, I might mount the steering wheel in a different place. But for now, I think this is gonna work, and it's getting us pretty close to being able to drive this thing, which is gonna come up in the next episode. So I think we're gonna have to end it off here.
Start it up, loser!
Well, couldn't just end this video off without firing this thing up. So I'm kind of firing it up mainly because I'm impatient, but also because I need to trim this wiring harness down in a lot of places. And I also need to extend it so I can get my instrument cluster up front, and my key, and my start button, and all that stuff. So by getting it fired up now, I can figure out which plugs I don't need, and then when I go to break down the wiring harness, I can take those things out, save, you know, maybe a 32nd of a pound. But anyway, I think I got everything hooked up. I checked it for leaks, no fuel's leaking, so we're gonna give it a go. See if this thing fires up and see how ridiculous it sounds with open exhaust. So for right now, I just have it hooked up so that I have choke on here and also my throttle so I can brap it a few times. But I don't have coolant in it yet, so we'll see if it fires up, and I'll let it run for a second, and then we're gonna shut it off just so we don't harm anything. But we gotta see what it sounds like. So let's give her a go. Oh, she gonna fire. This thing's gonna rip. Oh, I'm so pumped. All right, well, thanks for joining. I really appreciate you guys stopping by. Next time we're getting stuff hooked up so we can get this thing driving. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time on Provins Garage.